已经在录了。
那它到底那个什么祝融上来了吗？
我觉得应该上来了，有一些名字不太。
可能是，可能是新加坡国立大学的那些。
但我这儿好像看不见很多人呢。沈征宇、杜尔金娜，这是咱们自己人，没多少人啊，是吧？
但可能在那个在网上。
画廊视图，唐，这是咱们自己人吧？
对。
user， 我们给那个问一下那个谁。
祝融的上吗？
哎，老师，我问个问题，那个如果我有同学就是清华的想来旁听，可以把 Zoom 给我？可以，
清华内的都是 Zoom 号，清华外的都是祝融。
可以有100个人。
可以有100个人。
Zoom 可以容纳100个人。
可能要加的话尽快。我们这个海报应该已经在那个清华的论坛里就是发出去了。这是给的都是 Zoom 号，就不用问我们了。
对的，哇塞！
祝融的上来了吗
？The file is quite big.
What happened? So you can share the screen?
There's some kind of privacy ban. On his computer, so we're gonna take it to 4秒。你或者那个把那 email 发给我也行。
它是一个 Dropbox 的链接，然后 file 还。
那你发给我吧，来吧，发给我吧。
那行，您的邮箱是什么
？397，不是你微信发给我不就行吗？
可以。
发在哪儿了？
好，发过去了。好烦呀
！Download. Direct download to my desktop. 105兆是吧？
我这边看有200多兆呢。
288。
165，我这下的很快的，其实我这已经下来了。
好的。
祝融网的同事能说句话吗？
你在干嘛呀
？300多张啊，315、324、343、386、413，有这么大吗？How big is it?
How big is the file?
Let me try to erase one of the video, so maybe it becomes smaller. It's like 500 meg.
506, right? Okay.
Is that too big?
Okay.
I think we got it.
We got it.
Okay.
Over here, we just upgrade our internet a couple days ago, like super fast.
Okay, good.
Okay, we have it. We have it.
交换屏幕，交
Thanks.
换给我们。
I'm sorry about
All
that.
right.
Let's
No,
begin
that's
to
fine.
share.
We're gonna share it now. 助龙网的同事 OK 吗？
同学们把你们的摄像头打开。
对，就是我们可能需要给老师一个正面的一个信号，好吗？就还是把摄像头打开。So we have beside the 11 students in our class, we announced the forum to the Tsinghua University forum. So there might be more students in the class. Okay, we're gonna share the screen now. Okay. Is it this one, right?
Do you see the screen?
Yeah, I do.
Everybody?
Okay.
Okay.
You can go next.
Say next.
All right.
So should I do a little
Introduction. Yes,
about
please.
Morishita? Well, first of all, thank you for coming to our lecture. I need to hold on. Okay, thank you for coming to our lecture. Let's introduce Morishita, graduated from Rhode University, and then he goes to Harvard MDes. He got a master's degree in Harvard MDes. Right now he's doing, I think you're finished, right?
Yeah.
He finished his doctorate degree in Tokyo University. And today he's going to talk about his research in Tokyo University. And the title for the lecture is Memu Earth Lab. Okay, let's begin. Welcome, Morishita.
Thank you for your invitation, and I'm really glad to I'm honored to have everyone here. So today, since the discussion of your course was architecture, syntax, in calligraphy, I actually named the lecture Drawing Lines. So a bit of thinking about calligraphy in mind, I wanted to share you what type of research we're doing at the University of Tokyo. Next, please. So talking about calligraphy, when I heard this, when I read the course description, it brought me back a memory of 2003. So that's about 17 years ago when I was at the Rhode Island School of Design. Similar time of the, education as you guys are like a junior, third year students. So this is like me shoveling a snow on a snowy day. It looks kind of, it just is shoveling a snow on a snow day. But next. So I was drawing a plan of that I was designing, but with shovels on the snow ground. Next, please. So to make a path in a white ground, like a white background or white clear ground, it might be a paper, it might be snow, it might be a ground. So then when it was snowing, so it again covered by the white as time passes. So it's a bit like those calligraphy you do with water on stone. So the medium is water and stone, snow, shovel, the brush. If you can make some kind of a, correlation there, it is like realizing the weight of the brush stroke, right? If you're shoveling the snow, it is heavy. So you're not just drawing with ink or paper per se. You're actually holding a weight on your hand, drawing a plan. But then again, it gives you an idea about what does the weight does to your plan. So when it's heavy, the plan changes, right? Your idea about drawing changes. Your idea about writing changes. Of course, the syntax are are different when you have gravity on your hand. So it occurred to me about the term landscape. Once again, next please. So the term, next, sorry. So the term landscape, if you follow a journey into a discipline of landscape per se, John Stilgoe, who teaches at Harvard University, GSD, 2015, so it's quite recent, right? So he's been teaching there for a long time, but he published a book called What is Landscape? So he goes back into history, he goes back into all the terminologies of like say landscape or marsh or all of those terminology that's relating to landscape and tracing back where the term comes from, where the idea comes from, what does it mean, the landscape. So the scape in his book talks about in 16th century, like Dutch word, shoveled land. So shop meant shovel. So land shoveling is actually where the landscape idea or the language landscape comes from. So next, please. So I thought about doing an exercise myself in order to think of what does it mean to talk about syntax once again in context of where I am. So to gain a feedback from, let's say, gravity, right? Like the weight of the snow. So I once again went into the field of snow to draw a snowscape 17 years later. So after I heard the course description, I did my own exercise in order to understand about what you guys are doing and how I can be part of your discussion. Next, please. So this is part of Hokkaido, and it just snowed quite a bit, so it's all white, right? So there's a couple buildings and lines, but otherwise it might look like a piece of paper. And it's a beginning of thinking process or thought process. So if you have tools like shovels or brushes, those are tools to make certain purpose. Sometimes you use instrument is a bit different from tools, right? It may make sounds. If it's a sound, then it's a musical instrument. It creates another effect or another ground or another medium when you discuss about active calligraphy. So next, please. So I don't know if you can see clearly, but this is a path that I made with shovel. So shovel is, as you know, it's an industrial plastic product. The width of the path will often be the width of the shovel. So you'll shovel through the ground, and the edge condition, as you can kind of see, that each scoop keeps its shape. So you have like this kind of a geometry. It's piled onto the side of the path. And as you may imagine, if you have shoveled before, it is quite difficult to organize the mound of the snow. So it is scattered, random, scraped. The piles are somewhat geometrical as the shoveling compounds the snow into different shapes. So it removes the medium from the line that you're drawing. It's like a removal, and you remove the medium to draw the line from one place to the next. Next, please. Hopefully it will make sense. You guys may be all wondering why I'm talking about the snow, but so this is, if you have worn it before, it's called snowshoe, right? So you wear this and then you can walk on the fresh snow. If you use this is not removal of the medium, but rather compacting the ground, right? You compact the ground. If you click next, you might be able to hear the sound. Or maybe not. Yeah, there was a little sound, but if there's no sound, then please go to the next slide.
There is sound. We hear the sound.
Okay, So maybe I'm the only one who's not hearing the sound. Yeah, but, okay, next. Next. So this is a line that, you know, can you go back one more? Yeah. So the line, this is a line that the snowshoe makes, right? It is a path wide enough, say literally like 2 feet, creating an edge condition that is rough, rugged. If you can come up with some other terms as well, like it makes you think of the term like engraving or breaking. The ground is somewhat smooth, but not smooth as a shoveling. It is footstep that makes this type of texture. So when you change the tools, things completely changes, right? Please go to the next. I'll try to speed up a bit. So if you use a snow auger, gasoline engine driven and with caterpillars, and there's a little sound, maybe you can play just a little bit. Yeah, so please go to next. When you use this type of tool, the path is about 3 feet wide, the edge is sharp. On the both sides is a soft powder and smooth formation, right? So the active method of concentrated and consumes, it consumes a lot of energy, oil. Maybe it's not too sustainable per se, but however, the resulted edge condition is soft and smooth when you talk about the formal language or geometrical language. Next, please. So the round edge of the path feels different from the broken tones of like snowshoes compounded edge or shallow geometry. So it is quite interesting to start to think about what type of line you draw. Next, please. When one think of the tradition of this place, how people cultivated the land, and next, please. I wasn't able to test this one out yet, but of course, you can try to use Russian snow thread and horse helping your way to make a path in front of you. Next, please. But when considered about the urban activity or whether it be rural, the activity of current society, right? Most of the cases we use these heavy duty mechanics to large engines, and efficiency kind of takes care much of the processes of removal of snow. Like we don't draw lines anymore. We just remove everything in a way. So next, please. So this little exercise reminded me and look back that this is a place where we have the laboratory, and this is one of the buildings that Kengo Kuma designed. But one day I saw this clearing. Obviously, they needed to access to the building to have a service. But the path that the machine makes it's clear for automobiles and service vehicle, but it is, you know, it is hard to say, right? It is the slightest of aesthetic is accompanying the act of snow removal or drawing the line or relating to the building. So if it's not landscape, talk about snowscape, the act of designing the building or the architecture, the landscape, this relationship doesn't end when the structure is set in place. Its service, how do you approach the landscape? How do you approach the snow? How do you access to this ephemeral thinking is necessary part of the act of design, and you just don't want to see this pile of snow that's quite, you know, it's quite tough to see this next to a building that considers so much about near environment. So next, please. I would like to get going and introduce a bit about what type of activity we're doing right now. The activity that I'm in charge of right now is called Memu Earth Lab. I'm coordinating the laboratory. The next, please. The rotation, it is place specific to a certain extent. So it considers sustainability in cold climate region. It could be in another location as well. Then it thinks about differences. So the map of the Japan is not the whole entire thing is not shown, right? It is more focused on the northern area, including part of Russia, China. No, the boundary is quite different from just to say Japan. So next, please. If you're closing into more specific locality, we talk about sustainability in, it's called Tokachi Plain region. So the red dot is a place in which is in discussion, but which is located in Tokachi Plain region. Next, please. Next, please. So this place that has a round structure used to be a forest and then became a quarry. And then after that became a thoroughbred training center, the horse training center for racing. And then became a research center. And now we have the hotel and the university working on identifying a different way of sustainability from what we usually discuss. Next, please. Just to show like general image of the area, we have the mountain range and the river and a cultivated agricultural field and a forest. Next, please. When you come down to the river and then to the ocean, the landscape changes. Next, please. And then at the shore, there's a marshland. Quite, you know, what you would say nature is still there. Within the complex, next, please. Within the complex that I just showed you, there are many buildings designed through the architectural competition. Next, please. Designed through the international architecture competition, where it was an invited architecture competition for students, and when you win, the foundation supported to realize the building. So before those competition, Kengo Kuma has designed one of the buildings. Next, please. There's a building designed by Keio University to think about the way of life with horse. Next, please. And then there's the Oslo University designing how to enjoy the cold. So think about the relationship of the cold and the building and the region. There are Harvard University or Waseda University, Berkeley, many others. University has built structures over the time of 7 years. So there's a movie next that explains a little bit of activity. So I would like to share it with you. It's about 3 minutes. So.
哦，能听到声音吗？现在让声音，让声音。哦，这个房子。 这视频开的好吗？
So this was made in occasion with the workshop that we did with people called Musicity Global. So they're looking at the praise through the sonic experiences. Sonic means sound, right? So through the sound, how do we read the praise that looks in, with the vision, it looks what it is in front of you. But how does the sound relate you back to your landscape, your environment? So usually they work with places like London, Shanghai, Beijing, or Tokyo, so much of urban environments. But this time I asked them to try and work in a different context, and that is called Memu. So Memu is the area around this complex, and it's a beginning point to think about different environmental relationship of us to its sustainability. So I would like to, please go next. I would like to discuss a little bit about what we should be, or what
这是重放了。
we, meaning the Memu Earth Lab, should be thinking in terms of
Is this one?
context.
This one.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So on the left is like place like city, right? That's non-rural, very unique. There are not that many cities like Tokyo or Beijing, let's say London, New York. Those are only few cities in the world that many people are concentrating today, and many efforts on thinking about sustainability or what type of building culture, built environment we should be thinking. And so those are very unique in a way. The rest of the world, if you think of it, have a mass diverse environment. So mass meaning many, right? Many diverse environments are very different from each other. Let's say this place Memu is completely different from Tokyo. But when we think of a building industry or architectural design, many times what we base our experience, or how we express the information data, is very much built upon this left-hand unique urban environmental context, and how we make data, for instance. So not much has been discussed architecturally on this mass diversity. So this is where our interest is focused on. So next, please. So with the digitalization and using of IT, it's a quite recent thing, right? Let's say less than 100 years, less than almost 50 years. In this past 20 to 25, 30 years, it has become nominal. So when we have a place, what is out there, we now think about the data world, whether it be paralleling world or it's digital, analog. There are sort of a paralleling world that we think of. Next, please. In case of an urban environment, let's say city, for instance, many people talk about digital twin. I'm sure you guys do in Beijing as well, but here in Tokyo as well. we're catching up on the idea of whether it be building information modeling, or whether it be automated driving, digital city, IoT. Much of the keywords talks about this digital twin of the physical urban environment of the city. Next, please. But when we come back to the mass diverse environments, like the place that I've just showed you, there are a lot of specific characteristics of different places. But when we think of a data in which we want to base our thinking about spatial experience, spatial construction, architectural syntax for that matter, what is data remains somewhat unclear. So next, please. There are a few studies. There are a few, maybe many studies, especially from humanity and like social studies, public policies, that is not from quite engineering end or scientific end, but that tries to harvest these data or information. Like people talks about translocal knowledge, let's say traditional TEK, if you have heard about. If not, it's an interesting area to do a little research called traditional ecological knowledge, or sometimes people add environmental knowledge. So how does traditional cultures look at their relationships with its environment, and how do they transfer the knowledge or use the knowledge? I can think of, like, let's say the activity with musicity that I've shown you the video with sonic data. If you always not have to base your cultural experience on community, maybe there's a non-community based cultural data, there might be highly adaptive knowledge that is specific to the place, that's diverse and different from one place to the another. But so when you compare this, next please, to a type of discussion that we have often in academia, like let's say like Tokyo. Since I'm in Tokyo right now, much of the discussion surrounding architectural engineering, rather building science related discussion, focus on the left-hand side of digital twin, making this type of information digital transformation of the industry. So if I focus more on the right-hand side, mass diverse environments, it requires a lot of efforts because there are so many places in the world, and there are so many researchers in the world. There are so many architects in the world. I'm sure people whose title sometimes becomes local architects, who knows very much about the place, like local contractors, local suppliers, who knows the environment of the local economies and how they work. They of course have this knowledge, but oftentimes the current that comes from the urban economical finance is strong enough that sometimes, most of the times, it wipes out the subtlety or the potential of the resource that the local specific data may have. So next, please. And this also extends to what type of infrastructure we base our society or urban environment or built environment, our buildings, our architecture upon. So most of the urban environment are created with network grid-based urban infrastructure. If we think of mass diverse environments, we are more and so with climate change and social dynamics. In case of Japan, population decrease and aging. We are facing where we need to adapt our infrastructure quite rapidly, and it needs to keep changing instead of holding efficient working standard model. So the type of infrastructure, right, including like, let's say, energy, water, where does it come from? All of these are facing a it's not a nominal thing to think about anymore. It's something that we have to think one more time and build our own syntax. Next, please. So Memu Earth Lab works on the right-hand side. Not to say that we don't think about the urban environment. Next, please. But we need to get to a place where there's a mutual reliance, mutual learning between these urban and non-urban areas. I don't know if it's called rural, but the mutual learning between these two knowledges, so for sustainable reliance. Okay, so these are the type of activity that we're building in Memu Earth Lab right now. Next, please. There are many ways of doing such, but in process, we start with the place and then looking at the information with diverse organization, people. It could be sociological, sometimes anthropological approaches to build a practice on top of it with the collaboration with the hotel to think about and prototype new, whether it be a building or engineering, technology, so on. Next, please. So through that, hopefully we have this type of a saturation of information from social environment to built environment to natural environment. Next, please. In order to do so, we're building a researcher in residence program so that it's not just the process or discussion about information, it's about how to bring people to the place and get involved and create a different type of culture. Next, please. So as an actual activity, these are all so small, so you don't have to read them all, but just to get the idea that there's a place on the bottom, and then there's a practice on top, and then there's a data that comes out of the practice, in which then we can start to find out what the exemplary products are, exemplary building prototypes are, what type of sensitivity we have to have for this place to become sustainable society, so sustainable culture, and to build the adaptive infrastructure for time of change. Next, please. So if we can flip through a couple slides of snow, this is maybe why I am shoveling a path on the snow. Next, please. It might be a bit strange, for instance, that I started with shoveling the snow, but maybe you can see the relation now. Next, please. Next, please. That we have to sort of go back at thinking the service, the operation, how we use the building, how we use the complex, how we use the environment, what is it dependent on, what is relying on in order to not just to design, but to operate, to practice the spatial syntax. Next, please. So at Memu Earth Lab, we are asking many of different diverse disciplinary perspectives to join, so that in a way, I am from architectural disciplinary background, but in a way, the architectural discipline have this disciplinary dilemma of how far do you do your research? How far do you approach? You can keep approaching, like I say, geological information, vegetational, forestry, history, science. But when you think about drawing a line, you can keep connecting them to make network of knowledges, network of ideas. But also you can just draw a line in English. When you say draw a line, you just cut, you just cut cut the relationship with outside. It's like drawing a boundary. So just thinking about drawing a line on a piece of paper or on a snow or on a discipline. Architecture is standing on a very interesting standpoint today, where we have to be adapting to many many changing circumstances and parameters. Next, please. So if you look at the same place from the water basin and water system, the red line is a boundary line drawn of the town of Taiki, where this Memu is located in. So the town of Taiki is this red line, but obviously the water basin and water system are somehow has to do with it, but not all has to do with it, right? If you want to think about the ecological boundary, you cannot just think of the local district boundary. Next, please. So it's the same with the vegetation map. If you venture into the world of vegetation and forestry, you start to see a different landscape. You start to see different boundaries in which your mind process, your thought process, your research field changes according to what you work on. Next, please. So this is the overlay of vegetation and water basin of one of the, so it has nothing to do with the town district anymore, but it shows you somewhat the relationships, and it prepares you to talk and discuss with people of fishery, the forest, and the farmers, and people who take care of cows and horses. So once you approach into a different map, then your discussion and network of thoughts start changing. Next, please. I haven't really much yet, but there's obviously a geological point of view that gives you completely different idea about exactly the same place. So today, maybe next, please, we will quickly look through the forest. We will venture into the forest a bit. This is once again the same place from above. Next, please. Next, please. This is somewhat what it looks like in the fall in October. It's quite a beautiful place. When you think of forest, next, please. Maybe this is a type of image in the first impression hand that you might get. But what this is, once you start to think about what this is in terms of your environment, next, please. If we go back to the forest in early 1900s, a lot of people from mainland moved into this area. So the region is clearing out the forest for agricultural purpose and wood as a resource for exporting. So once it is considered that much of the forest were gone, much of the forest you see is either residual natural forest or forests that are being planted. Next, please. Or after the planting, it came back to it's not called natural forest, but it's like a rejuvenated forest. So if we think of building industry and building discipline of architecture, we can visit local timber and building structure fabrication factories. And then next, please, think about the structure, whether this wood is sustainably harvested, what is the local industry. We can think of that in terms of the boundary, right? If we just stop there. But next, please. If we think of our buildings relying on the forest or the local forest, what you see in the far is the mountain and the forest. Next, please. Next, please. So the first impression in which you have, I showed you the sort of beautiful color changing autumn forest, but most of the forest, next please, looks like this, where it is highly maintained and cultivated and planted for the forestry purpose. Next please. Next please. Next, please. So they're replanting after they have planted they have cut down the trees. So the way in which, next please, the way in which the industry works, obviously it's kind of sad, right? How it kind of just goes at it. It doesn't look too pretty, but this is how the industry is working right now. Next, please. So it's a bit like this, right? Next, please. It's quite different from something like this. So it's not a bad thing that the industry is in practice and the forestry is working, but when you think of the ecological relationship of one forest to the another, the animal who lives there, the way we understand the landscape as visitors who lives there, there are different dynamics and layers that's not just all answered in the forestry. So maybe to create a timber for building structure and for wood flooring or something like that, it needs to be industrialized and heavily cultivated. However, what we need to think about from now on brings a different layers of information. Please. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so this is what it looks like from the above, but so from the airplane, the Hidaka mountain range looks like this. Next, please. Within it, I have visited a farm that keeps a horse, right? So our complex at Memu Earth Lab is also used to be a thoroughbred horse training center. But when you look at the mountain, there are different practices as well. So there's a different layers of practice of service in this area. So ways of engaging with the forest is not only for timber, but think of this as a program of architecture, right? Not simply the material resource, but sort of a practice of everyday life as well. So next, please. He keeps the horses. He keeps his horses on the mountain range that is called maki. Next, please. So maki is a form of housekeeping that utilizes naturally bounded area such as valley or peninsula to free-ranging herds. So these horses are free-ranged and they live in herds. They don't live one by one. In Tokachi, of course, it gets really cold. So in the winter, they utilize bound structures. So it's not all just, let's say, kept in the wild. They are very nurtured. But this maki is a very old ways of keeping horse in Japan. It's a very traditional method. Next, please. And they look quite peaceful. No? Next, please. And the horse does not only grasses, as one imagine they go into the woods and just about eat anything they find. It's quite interesting to think of the horse living in the forest, not as a first impression or image of just horse with a grassland and empty field. So next, please. The boundary in which this horse draws is quite interesting because this Maquis boundary, if we calculate in a very rough way, is about 80 hectares. So it's like a geographical ways of drawing a boundary with horse, not just human. So next, please. So the barn is located on the place where I have dropped the pin, but this round-shaped valley, the whole of it is a boundary for the horse to be free roaming. Next, please. So one can consider this zone of 80 hectares as a line drawn by the habitat of horse and our activity to keep them. So there's a relationship of human activity and a horse free ranging their, like, let's say, habitual behavioral boundary that we can start to understand the land in a different way. So it is quite different from housekeeping in the barn as a sort of a de facto standard. Next, please. So when we go back to our complex and think about these, of course, this was for thoroughbred horse, horse racing. They're raised for horse racing, so they are kept individually, and these lines are drawn for that. But it really makes us rethink in which how do we actually should be drawing lines on the field? What are the relationship with horse and human from now on? How do we, next please, how do we create a spatial syntax in which we can discuss different type of cultural relationships that's forestry, forest equals forestry, ocean equals fishery, one industry to one cultural norm. So I would like to quickly go through a different set of slides. Next, please. So if we were to add another layer of engagement, like a historical one, like a traditional one, if we go to Tono in Iwate, if you have chance, please go there. That's the red bounded area in Iwate Prefecture. Next, please. And next, please. So it's quite deep in the mountain, but they used to have this typology of horse, barn, and human living quarter attached to each other in a 90-degree shape. Next, please. So these are the ways in which we can difference how we used to create relationship between horse and human. Next, please. It is quite interesting, next please, to think about, yes, we don't live this way anymore. Next, please. But then there's a lot of syntax, there's a lot of discussion here in which then how do we, sorry, next please. How do we think about the way we live and what we do in a society today? Next, please. Most of these buildings and elements are not just for, or in the past, the everyday life is all that is, right? Today we have thing called work, job, academia, life. That's the part of the time that you spend that's not a work, or that's not that's something called vacation. So there are many layers in which we sort of pick and choose. But in this architectural typology, next please, most of the elements are overlays of different information, different engagement with local culture and everyday life. So this is a snow thread, a bit different from one that I've showed you earlier. There's also a snowshoe, and then something that you put on your back to carry firewood. Next, please. So we're not going back to this time anymore, but we need to be learning still from how do we overlay these information life element of nature into our building discussion. Next, please. So those are the rice barrels, and these are the rice fields in that area. Next, please. And this is some of the practices, some of the local rice growers still plant by hands because of the consideration to the land, the soil quality, the practice of people. Next, please. And of course, these are historical buildings. We don't use them anymore, but just to think of the relationship between the everyday practice, right, and the building typology. These are the building to dry the rice. Next, please. That is called maseshin, but mase is this gauge, right? Gate that you keep the horse in. So there's a relationship with the rice field and what you use as a building material and the horse culture and so on. Next, please. So the structure like this threshing house it looks very unique, right? It's nothing you've seen before in, let's say, Tokyo, because obviously there's no need for this in Tokyo, but it doesn't exist here for any reason, but more so has to do with everyday way of creating society here. Okay. What you do as a culture or society or your productive meaning, like creating rice or creating a forest wood. Your next, please. Yeah, so your belief, your meaning the people from long time ago, but people's belief in that place is created through that type of relationship between the forest, the horse, the agriculture, the house. Next, please. And it is the disciplinary boundary of, let's say, anthropologist or historian or writer in the past, right? Not that many architects have ventured into really try to understand what this type of cultural studies may result in a, let's say, a design of a building, design of a syntax, design of cultural background in which, cultural figure ground in which your ideas are based upon. Next, please. So just to quickly wrap up the discussion, this is one of the photo I found in Tono area, but he's praying to the mountain god, which is symbolized with a stone and the foot of the tree. So the horse, the forest, the everyday activity were part of the sort of a cultural discussion, but it is very difficult, not as the archival, right? So this photo was also like in museum. This place that I just showed you is also like a, it grows licensed so on, but it is not a living museum, right? It's a sort of a preservation or conservation of the past culture. So if you can imagine all of these to be an active, maybe a branch of study called TEK, like that I showed you earlier, of traditional ecological knowledge, might try to do that. But as a design field, as an architectural field, it is quite important to think of this not as just an inspiration and not just as an archive, but as a living data, living information. How do we try to understand these learnings and knowledge to start our discussion about architecture from now on? Next, please. So when we go back to this diagram that I've showed you earlier, in a way, we lack in methods to comprehend these information data as a set of source, like source meaning resource for which architecture or artifact services are then diversified. That diversify for, diversity, it doesn't just exist, right? It's something you keep creating, and you keep creating because you have to adapt to specific ways of life that this world provides, like adapting to climate change, adapting to social change, adapting to urbanization, adapting to many changing circumstances. So, of course, including the social challenge, disaster, industries challenge. So in a way, it is creating a new syntax for our coming culture because of these overlaps of knowledges, data, complexity and diversity of information, or information or complexity and diversity of life that we see are able to keep adapting to our new culture, construction and architecture, therefore, to the social needs and its environment. Next, please. So it is in that sense, practice of architecture, I guess, necessitates language far diverse than we have today, right? It's not just a digital copy of what's in front of us. It is necessary to reread what is in front of us, whether it be through sound or whether it be through microscopes, whether it be different type of knowledge that we haven't yet approached. So we're now beginning to collaborate with people next year who has disciplinary practice in, let's say, public health or public policy, and continuing to work with sound artists and designers and more to create understanding about this mass diverse environments and how do we create a future sustainable reliance with the city environment in which both are very important. They both have very important role in this society, right? So yeah, the time has passed a little bit, so that's it for my discussion. Right, thank you.
Oh, thank you for the lecture. It's a very wonderful lecture. Any of the students have a question? Anybody? 有没有同学是有这个疑问的？
You know what? Right now there's 1,800 students.
1,800 on the web. 1,800 listeners. So let me begin with one question.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the landscape? How would you position landscape in the infrastructure in your research?
Right. You know, in Japan, it is a bit strange, but there are practice of gardening, quite a lot of gardening practice, right? As you can kind of imagine through traveling to temples and stuff like that. But there are not too many landscape approaches that people approaches through ecological construct or looking at the extent of forest to ocean to habitat that lives there. So that in a way we have to create a different approach to idea of landscape itself, right? in the past, the landscape design, meaning surrounding of the building, like in Chinese character as well, we write outside construct or something like that. So, but now we have to think of about the salmon who swims in a river, the bears that come see the salmon, the logs meaning like a driftwood that, you know, get driven down from the river to the ocean, and its effect to salmon's effects to our lives. So yes, it's starting to become a more and more complex, diverse information than what we have learned in the past, let's say. But we're finding a new disciplinary horizon today.
So to continue the first question, how would you define sustainability in your study? I think it's very different from when sustainability comes out. I think you have a new definition for sustainability.
I think the sustainability is a term in which we, you know, in a way, I don't think I can define it, because it's to me it's a tool to think and to start discussing, right? Because in a very early slide, I showed you the Russian territories in northern part of Japan as a sort of a bigger regional map. I didn't show the map of Japan. So in the past, we maybe thought of the nation's boundary as how we sustain that nation or how we sustain that part of the world. But like today, we are discussing with neighbors, like, you know, neighboring countries from New York to China to everywhere, right? So we're looking at the sustainability, let's say, when we talk about Hokkaido, it is much more related to the colder region of like Russian area, and we have to look at information that comes from there and not just what's in front of you. So sustainability, I don't think that there's a good definition for it, but it's a good instrument. It's a tool. It's a communication tool, so that we can start discussion about what we need to think about in the first place.
Yes, in the first part of the study, you frame it as music city, right?
Yeah, that was the
music city. I forgot the term that you used. Music city, the sound. Did you use the sound to measure
right
context? Yeah. Or
if you search online data, Music City is a friend of mine who made a group or the activity, and they're the group of field recordist or musician who goes around the cities to do field recording or record the environmental sound in order to make a music or make a musical response to architecture or buildings, to look at the same building in a different way, to reread the city as more vibrant sound environment, sonic environment. So they were sort of the collaborator with us in order to look at the same place in a different way. So look at the place called Memu through the lens. I don't know if lens is the right term for the sound, but through the microphone or sound, or through the ear, right? Look at the place with different sense. Yeah.
So how would you think reinterpreting the city or the opposite, the rural context, reinterpreting it through sound, how does it change the discipline of architecture or urban design?
So
does it change it fundamentally, or
for urban context, they have been working on quite a bit on the use of the sound, but yeah, if you think of the sound design of the city, I don't think there's much discussion, not even yet, right? So of course, I think it's going to start to change once urban designers, urban planners, they start to consider sound as a very important element of the city design. That's yet to come, right? I don't think there's that many disciplines that like they all consider blocking the sound that's considered noise, but they don't really have too much of a ways in which to design the sound from the beginning. So in place like Memu, or let's say non-urban, like rural environment, mass diverse environments, we're creating a radio next season with this musicity people. So in radio, there are many local voices. So we're starting to find ways in which to understand the voices of local people, community activity, and to realize it's not really to say a scientific cataloging or archiving of people's life, but it's more so how to communicate local voices, local specificities of these practices to a wider range of knowledge, and what does it mean for the city to hear the voice. So it is like creating a network or creating a relationship between places through the sound. So yeah, it's hard to, yeah, please follow us and see where it goes. I don't know where it's gonna go yet, to be honest. We're just
yeah, that's my next question. Where would you think your study would go?
Okay, so I think this study is one of the many to come. It doesn't have to be this place called Memu. It could be many places in the world, but I'm starting to try to understand this way of working as in a way like methodology, right? So ways in which to pronounce the voice of the mass diverse environments. So many places from now, I hope, will start to carry these informations, data that's very specific to the place, in which the designers, in which the engineers, in which the politicians maybe can use their mind, use as a starting point for designing. Like in the past, even myself, who thinks I know this place quite a lot, through going there quite a lot, but when I start designing, let's say, a building, you realize all of a sudden that there aren't too many data of the place to begin with. If you're in a city, there's so much information and there's so much parameters in which almost it's not easy. It's very difficult and complex to come out with a really good solution. But in these places that is not city, there aren't too much of a methodology. There aren't too much discussion about about this data. So my next step is to make these into more of a ways of doing things, or ways for architecture to begin. So it's probably not a design methodology, but it's pre-design, like before architecture begins, or the begin. In order to create the beginning of architecture, we need these information, data, knowledge to be active in the place.
Okay, great. Any more questions? Anybody else?
I have a question.
Okay, you first. It's okay, you first.
I noticed that in your research, your researchers are of different space scales, from something like Kengo-kuma snow house, and also to the water system or forest system of a region. So which space scale do you focus more? I mean, the regional condition or something like microclimate?
Okay, so yeah, it's a really good question. For myself, I won't be able to focus all by myself, right? So it is like creating a researchers community or bringing in researchers whose interest is synchronized, and make a group of researchers in order to look at different scales. In previous architecture practice, right? Let's say microclimate, as you said, I did much of a monitoring, like environmental monitoring using sensors. And so you get digital data of the climate inside the building, surrounding the building. We are getting a data of the underground geothermal data right now. But those are, things that you kind of have to do because you don't know anything about it. But then when you go scale back into more like satellite view or from the space, right? Space back into the Earth. You of course find different sets of parameters that you haven't seen, and that I don't think maybe in the past was considered maybe urban planning or right. It wasn't a direct disciplinary line that you draw on architecture discipline, but I think from now it starts to merge a little bit more. So in when you think about like microclimate, I'm also thinking of bringing in a microscopic perspective, looking at enzymes or cultures that grows in the air of the place. So maybe with that perspectives, right, looking at the health monitoring of the people, how does the blood circulates through your finger? So you use microscopic perspective to understand the health condition of the people. In the past, I think for the building designer, those health conditions were just a result of how people use your building. But from now on, those researchers are starting to talk to us, right? They're starting to have a communication with us. So now we have the blood circulation engineer next door from me working together in next year. So yeah, we'll see where too thin, but yeah, I might be spreading too thin, and we'll see what happens because we haven't seen that before in discipline of architecture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm really interested in the word adaptive that you use in the presentation. So I want to ask you, can the architectures you built or you designed in your strategy could be really adaptive to the ever-changing environment or to the changing landscape? Because nowadays, like the global warming or the soil erosion or the process of urbanization, so the landscape or the environment is always changing very fast. So I wonder if your design could be adaptive to this changing process, or could it always updated itself, like to be adaptive with all the informations you get? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you keep updating your buildings, right? Because it's more of the premises. I think that when you're designing, if you think of your building as sort of the end point of your design, then obviously that has less of the adaptability in its construction. You consider some type of given information as a sort of something that you respond, and then you do your building, and then the building is a respond to the parameter. But as you said, the parameter is always changing, and now in a way we understand that the parameter is always changing, that we have to consider that as a premises of, so when you have a design, when you have a clients think about today, but in a way you have to give a client a perspective for 100 years or 50 years or whatever the building maybe in that case, sometimes you don't design a building, you design a space for the client, you design a service for the client that lasts for 1 year, and then decide 2 years later, maybe building is the right solution. So in the past, I think, you know, the economic boundary of architectural practice always had a sort of a client-architect relationships. But today, I think we are in a place where we, you know, in a way, counter-propose a different financial framework that adapt both the client's needs and the ecological, economical needs of the world. So yeah, we'll see if we can design a building like that from now on.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Do we have more questions? No? Well, thank you for the wonderful lecture.
Yeah, wonderful opening for our series.
Yes, it's great, and it's
you.
very early. It's very early in the morning. It's like
What's your time?
My time is 10:30.
10:30.
Oh,
Everyone's
1 hour.
tired, right?
1 hour earlier.
9:30 in
Right,
Beijing.
yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got like 1,800 people, so that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing your study, and it's, you know.
Yeah, we're gonna make a post, like a brief introduction and the content of the lecture, and we're gonna share it all around.
Okay. Great.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
thank you
you.
for giving me the opportunity. I hope to hear back
It's great.
how your studio goes and how the course goes, and
Yeah.
to see it work.
Yes, welcome to the midterm and the final. I think you're joining part of it, right?
Right.
I'll try to join in, right? Once again with this.
OK， 好，我们谢谢玉务老师，谢谢。Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna say bye-bye.
We're gonna say bye-bye and stop right here, and we're gonna come back in. All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.